Hello everybody, this is Refresh, and I am here to report on my pre-release experience for Theros Beyond Death. Theros Beyond Death is the first return to the plane of Theros, which was first debuted way back in, I want to say 2013, so maybe 6 years ago. The set itself back then focused heavily on enchantments, and that's also true for Theros Beyond Death. The pre-release itself wasn't impressive just because Wizards have been really cutting back on the frills that they add to the pre-release. So the majority of the pre-release experience is just in the games that you will open and play with this pre-release pack. And it's kind of a shame because I really liked some of the extras that they added to Theros, particularly the challenge decks. I thought those were a lot of fun. But the set itself, from what I have experienced, I think plays pretty well. So I enjoy the experience of playing Sealed in Theros, and that is almost enough to make up for the fact that the pre-release experience isn't all that special versus just playing your regular Sealed deck. This is what you get when you go to a pre-release. You get a pre-release pack inside. It has a slipcover with a bit of Theros artwork, and then a Planeswalker symbol on what is basically a deck box. Inside, you're going to get 6 packs of Theros Beyond Death. In addition, you'll get an arena card, which contains a code for a pack of magic from Theros Beyond Death. You get a card divider. You get a little informational pamphlet here, which is a bit of artwork, and on the back, how to build a sealed deck. And it's some pretty good tips, especially for a first-timer. In your pre-release, you get 1 premium foil promo card, and mine happened to be Erebos the Bleak-Hearted, and so that is the one that I got. It's shiny and it has a little date stamp on it. And then I opened 6 packs and got all these cards. I also got a blue spin down counter. I think I put it in my dice bag, so it's not there, but it's a pretty standard spin down counter that you get with any of these sets. I believe these ones are in the 5 primary magic colors. So this is everything that I opened in all of my packs. I got a couple extra rares because of the promo Erebos card, and I also got a foil Archon of Sun's Grace that takes the place of a common slot, so I actually got a bunch of extra rares. My rares included that Archon of Sun's Grace. I got Erebos the Bleak-Hearted. I also got the Nightmare Shepherd. I got the Underworld Breach, a Dryad of the Elysian Grove, Ashiok Nightmare Muse, Temple of Alignment, and Temple of Abandon. I had a bit of an issue with this pool because while I had the least number of cards in black, I had multiple bombs in black, including Ashiok as well as a Nightmare Shepherd. Both of those are incredibly powerful cards, and it made me want to play black a lot. However, the card pool was very thin, and so I would have to play just about everything that I got in black if I wanted to play it, because I can't really splash the Nightmare Shepherd because of the 2 black mana, unless I guess I was in green and I had the Dryad of the Losing Grove going on. However, green was not all that thick of a set of cards either. My most cards were in red and in blue, but looking at the cards that I opened, red was surprisingly low in playable creatures, and blue was decent, but there was not a lot of synergy going on with what I had going on in blue. And so even though red and blue were my fattest in terms of pure number of cards, I actually found white to be the most balanced of the cards that I had. And not only did I have some removal in the Birth of Meletus, but I had the excellent combat trick, Karametra's Blessing, and then the Archon of Sun's Grace is also an enormous bomb. And so while I played around with the combination of red, blue, and green, and as well as white, because using the Temple of Enlightenment, I can splash white or splash blue, and the Temple of Abandon really made me consider going red-green. I thought that in the end, I'm at a pre-release, I've opened like multiple bombs, like I should just see what I can do, and I decided to make a white and black deck splashing blue for the Ashiok Nightmare Muse, since I already have a little bit of fixing of the Temple of Enlightenment and the Altars of the Pantheon as well. So this is the deck that I built. Obviously the bombs all made it in, and although Erebos Bleak-Hearted is not going to be a creature the vast majority of the time, it's still a pretty good card draw engine, and it lets me replace my dying creatures with new cards for life. And I think that alone is just good enough for it to absolutely make the deck. And I splashed Ashiok Nightmare Muse thanks to my Temple of Enlightenments. I put in a couple islands as well, and then I bounced the rest of the lands at 6 plains and 7 swamps, and that would get me to 16 lands. I felt like I could go to 16 lands because I didn't have any 6-drops, and although I am a little thick on 4s and 5s, I thought that without any 6-drops, I really only needed to hit my 4th land most of the time, and every once in a while get my 5th land. So I thought that statistically it was okay, especially with a Temple Alignment to fix me. That said, there is a little bit of risk in that just because I have the 2 islands and I have all these double mana cost spells. The rest of the curve is, again, really thick on the 4-drops, but I think that's okay because I have enough going on in the early game to slow down my opponents. I had the Mire Triton to slow down big creatures, as well as the Birth of Melitus getting me a 0/4 wall. The Alseid of Life's Bounty will protect all of my bombs, my Nightmare Shepherd, my Archon of Sun's Grace in particular, but any other creature that needs protection, I can use it to protect, and I think it works well with the Mire Triton as well, to get a second use out of the Death Touch ability. And then I have some removal. I ended up playing one aspect of Lamprey, because I think that the ability to trigger Constellation and also get lifelink and also make my opponent discard 2 is actually pretty good. The deck, like most of the set, I think, has quite a bit of potential for me being blown out, but if I don't get blown out, then I will get a lot of reward. Now, I also have Commanding Presence, which is an even better aura, but those are the only 2 that I have. And then removal, Birth of Banishing Light, Final Death, and then Mogus' Favor can pick off X1s as well. And then I have Karametra's Blessing because I think it works well to protect my enchanted creatures and my enchantment creatures. So this is the deck, and how could you not play all the bombs? So now let's talk about the games that I played. The first match was against a red-white deck, and my opponent took a mulligan to 5 in the first game, and so the writing was kind of on the wall from the very start, and I kind of overwhelmed them in general with more creatures, more plays, more quality removal, and one blowout with the use of the Karametra's Blessing. Especially once I got the Nightmare Shepherd going and I was getting token copies of creatures that got exiled and reusing their abilities, like, it was just really hard for my opponent to recover. In the second game, my opponent took a mulligan to 6 as well, so my opponent again started on the back foot, but it didn't start uneven though, thanks to my opponent being able to keep up with me in terms of plays. It's just when I played Ashiok, my opponent couldn't keep up with my value engine. In particular, just the production of a 2/3 every turn was something that he couldn't deal with. And so I eventually overran my opponent with creatures and, removing his bigger threats, helping me to take the game and win. So my first match, I went 2-0, in part due to luck. In my second game, I was up against a green-white player. And in the first match, we stayed fairly even for a while, but eventually I pulled ahead of him on board, removing his threats with removal spells and combat tricks, and then my opponent started drawing into lands, and, well, lands versus my creatures, I win. So that was the first game. And that was on the back of me mulliganing to 6 as well. In the second game, my opponent and I both started at 6. Due to some, land issues. And I think we were relatively even up until, I played Ashiok again and then just overwhelmed my opponent with tokens. Playing your bombs is hard to overcome sometimes, especially if you don't have removal for those bombs. And I had Ashiok, and I also eventually got Erebos out on top of that. And so I had card draw engines going on, because every time my creature would die, I could lose 2 life and get another creature, and sometimes I'm losing tokens and getting creatures off that, and so, it would be really hard for my opponent to recover from that bomb unless you could remove it, and so I just rode the bomb to victory there. My third match was up against a Jeskai player. I started on a mulligan to 6, and my opponent started on a mulligan to 5, and we stayed fairly even, but eventually my opponent, made a giant creature with tons of enchantments, and I couldn't draw removal, and eventually I was reduced to chump blocking, and then at that point, I ran out of cards and I just started drawing lands, and my opponent kept drawing gas, and so it was kind of over for me once we got to the point that I was chump blocking. There was no way for me to get further than that, so I lost that first game, even though my opponent mulliganed to 5, and that was really good for my opponent. The second match, I started with another mulligan, mulliganing to 5, so again, not a great start for me. My opponent kept their entire hand, and I got mana screwed at first. Stuck on 2 plains, no swamps, unable to cast the majority of the cards in my hands. Despite that, I actually managed to hang on for a very long time because, I had a low enough curve that I kept being able to play things. But my opponent basically got the mana advantage and was able to cast their stronger spells, and so I ended up losing that one pretty badly, taking me 2-1. My final match was up against a Jund player, and I started the game with a mulligan to 5, but again, it's one of those situations that even though I started on the back foot, I was able to play a Nightmare Shepherd, and that kind of just got me to the end, especially once I put a enchantment on it and my opponent just wasn't able to find any removal for it. I just kept making tokens to chump block and then hit him for 6 every time I was swinging, and my opponent was forced to chump block, and so I won on the Voltron, kind of like how my opponent in the last match did in the first game, and that was a win on my part, and I was pretty happy to be able to win on a mulligan to 5. In the second game, my opponent was on the play, but they got mana screwed pretty badly. They got screwed out of one of their colors and weren't able to draw the lands that they needed to cast much. They did eventually cast their Caryatids, which acted as lands, but at that point I had a board advantage, and I was able to land my bomb. Once I played my 3/4 lifelink, create Pegasuses every time I play an enchantment creature, my opponent saw the writing on the wall and ended up conceding the match. Now, that opponent was a 3-0 opponent, and so before we started playing the match, we decided to split the reward with him winning the match. And so, I came out ahead in the end because I was matched up, and I was fortunate to be matched up. So I ended up with 6 packs as my prize. I didn't get them at this moment because the store didn't have them on hand, so I'm going to be picking them up the next time I visit Emerald Knights. And that was the games that I played at the Theros Beyond Death pre-release. Overall, it was a fun experience just because I think the set plays really well together. I love the synergies between all the cards. Even the draft-only cards are quite synergistic with each other, and it's really fun to put together the different synergies between the cards and just have things like Constellation Trigger, you play the enchantment, and a lot of the synergies with cards are like for more than one card, and so you have that ferocious trigger on green and red, which can work with your enchantments to give power and toughness to your creatures, because then your creatures have 4 power, which causes your green and red bonuses to take place. And it's just really a wonderfully synergistic set, and I think that makes the limited experience really fun. And that made this experience, because it's not like there was a whole lot else going on with the production of this particular pre-release. There were no extras aside from the expected extras of the promo card and the spin down counter. So a good set, and I was happy to go in the pre-release, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens when I go back for draft. Let me know how your games went in the comments below. How were your pre-releases? Did you win? Did you lose? What were some cool things that happened in your games? Mine, I think, was just getting to play almost all the bombs and then riding them to a win, and somehow being able to make my relatively shallow pool of white and black work together to that end. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you'd like to see more such videos, hit subscribe. This was Refresh. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.